After the Eurobodalla Council announced the sale of its visitor information centres, there are questions being raised about the future of the Lighthouse Museum in Narooma. Council has agreed to negotiate with any new leaseholders of the site to keep the museum, but that hasn't allayed fears from locals and the local Historical Society. Laurelle Pacey is the president of the Narooma Historical Society. Hi, Laurelle, how are you?
Hi, Simon, I'm good. Just to correct something, my understanding is that Council is not selling the Narooma Visitor Centre building and the Lighthouse Museum. They're called for expressions of interest to lease the building.
Okay, so an important difference there. So what are your concerns about what's going on?
Well, it's not just there's concerns of the Historical Society. As you're probably aware, there's a widespread feeling in our community that a great passion about the Lighthouse Museum and the Visitor Centre and the role that it plays in our community. Just to put it in perspective, both the original building, which is the first part of the Visitors Information Centre, and then that was built in the early 1980s, and then the Lighthouse Museum section in the late 1980s were built by our community. And so the Visitor Centre is a shop window on our businesses and what the area has to offer. And the Lighthouse Museum came about following the automation of the light on Montague Island and the concern that the original light that had actually shone on Narooma over well over 100 years was going to be put into storage, never to be seen or heard of again. Now, Lindsay Kanui led the charge that we should somehow, as a community, get that light in Narooma, and his voice was was supported by the Apex Club, of which he was a member, and then the wider community. And the community actually led the charge and did a lot of work to make that happen. And they got a bit of funding and stuff. So now what's important to remember is that light mechanism, which many of your listeners will be familiar with, it's a fabulous piece of equipment. When it was installed in 1989, I think it was, or 1988, 1989, it was valued at $2 million. Now that and some other artefacts are on loan, sort of permanent loan from the Australian Maritime Safety Authority, on loan to Council, who's currently responsible for their management and maintenance.
Right. Okay, so does it matter, Laurelle, where they are kept or if they have to move?
To move, it does indeed. You're probably familiar with the little lighthouse, which was built specifically to house this light mechanism, which floats in a bath of mercury. And it's been specially designed to, for ventilation and everything, according to the strictest standards, and they're inspected every so often to ensure everything's hunky-dory with that. So there is no other place that can be installed. And then, the whole building is specifically designed to be visible for people coming into town, for people to pull over. Council about, I suppose, maybe 5-6 years ago or whatever, spent a lot of money improving the parking there for long vehicles, etc. And so to expect a lessee, one of the conditions of the lease that Council's calling for expressions of interest for is that whoever takes on the lease is responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of the museum, which is actually a big ask, which makes the future of, whether it's going to be a sustainable sort of thing. But the big concern, it's not just the Lighthouse Museum. There's a strong feeling in our community. There's witness with the petition that's being done that Council is not right with its interpretation that people do everything online and that the ambassadors are going to be businesses and stuff around town. So I don't think that's been explained to our community what Council's thinking is.
All right, so you're worried not just about any lease arrangements and what that means for those historical items, but also the loss of the Tourist Information Centre and that face-to-face contact, Laurelle.
Exactly, but the museum is such a gem and is often through the course of the day, you see a lot of people actually go down and look at the displays. The Historical Society's role in the museum is we've contributed information and photos to the various redesigns of the interpretation signs, etc., over the years. There's been about 3 revamps that I can think of the whole museum design, and so it's really important that continues, and that sort of really is a big attraction too for people. People come in, they see the lighthouse there, and they think, "Oh, what's that?" And then see the business information centre and stuff like that. But the Historical Society's made, and I personally have made representations to council directly, to council staff directly about all these concerns. And my concern with the Visitors Information Centre, just representing a body of opinion, I think, is that the Visitors Information Centre, and this is supported by a national perspective on visitor information servicing paper that was done just in the last couple of years. Visitor information centres still have a role to play, but there's difference of opinion in council staff about that.
Is there much of a breakdown in terms of the demographics, Laurelle? Who misses out on seeing more when they visit a town if there's no face-to-face help, and which businesses are more likely to miss out on that foot traffic?
Well, my understanding from the National Perspective paper is that the big advantage of the visitor information centres is that face-to-face contact, find out other, various places, etc., is that people, that are difficult to find often online, and also because things get dated, etc., is that it results in people extending their stay. Now, there are figures available. If people stay an extra day in a town, in an area, that translates into dollars for a whole range of businesses. And it also, having that, sort of face-to-face contact and a meaningful exchange with people also results in return visits. So that, it's really difficult. But so I can see, Council's point, but when you look at tourism as being the major industry in the Eurobodalla, it's very frustrating.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I guess there might be a lot of people who agree with you and some other views as well, Laurelle. Interesting discussion, and thank you very much for telling us about the concerns.
Okay, my pleasure.
Laurelle Pacey, the president of the Narooma Historical Society, raising those concerns about the loss of information centres, and particularly at Narooma, and also what it means for historical artefacts, including the old lighthouse.